Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here in Huntsville, Alabama at one of the world's most important space museums, the Space and Rocket Center, which has and tells the story of man's exploration of space. And we're honored to have with us the director of the museum, Dr. Deborah Barnhart, retired United States Navy captain, obviously PhD from Vanderbilt University. And you've got to have, ma'am, one of the world's coolest jobs.
I love this work. This work has passion and it has mission, and that mission is our future.
It really is, and I want you to sort of walk us through the mission of the museum. But the most important thing is that we're now in the 50th anniversary of man's greatest exploration. I still get goosebumps every time I think that man landed on the moon, July 1969. This year will be the anniversary when Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins did that great voyage of exploration. Talk to us about how the museum is commemorating it, given that you have so many one-of-a-kind artifacts here at the museum.
Well, Huntsville is the rocket city. Huntsville is the location from which the entire moon mission was planned, designed, and executed. At that time, the Cape and the facilities down in Mississippi at the Stennis Center both reported to Huntsville, as did Houston for a while. So Huntsville has always been the epicenter of the management of the engineering, design, and execution of the programs. In fact, even today, 50 years after Apollo, we are designing, executing, and building America's next great ship, the Space Launch System, here in Huntsville. So, if you want to get off the planet, you're not going to go without us here from Huntsville. We're the propulsion guys. So we're really looking forward to celebrating this 50th anniversary. Many of the men and women who worked on that program those years ago are docents here at the Space and Rocket Center. So we look forward to honoring them and to honoring what is arguably mankind's greatest achievement.
It really is extraordinary, and you realize how many people have really passed. I mean, it's been 50 years. Some of the people who were in their prime, they were in their 40s and 50s who were running the program at the time, even though I think it was extraordinary how somebody like Sonny Maria was given the F-1 engine design as a 26-year-old engineer, which was extraordinary. Talk to us about how you get a new generation excited. Our generation, every time we think of it, every time I look at the moon, I think of the moon missions, frankly. Less so for a younger generation. I mean, even though there should be even greater interest because of Elon Musk and SpaceX and obviously some of his antics associated with it. I'm sorry, it's pretty cool to launch one of your own cars into space, into a solar orbit. How do you maintain interest in a new generation that are maybe not even as excited about going to Mars, for example, as perhaps our generation was going to the moon?
Well, Elon's a space camp graduate, so I think his restlessness, it really fades over into the rest of the population behind him when young people realize that an entrepreneur like him, who's really upended 3 complete industries, they're interested in that. It's not a single focus on, I want to be the first man on Mars. It's a focus on what is technology and what is it going to mean to our lives? What technologies are going to come in the wake of these explorations? I mean, that's the really important question is, what is it that's going to happen because we push ourselves to technologically take care of all the problems that are required to solve all the things that need to be solved before we go to another planet? What is that going to mean to us in terms of technology for the rest of our lives? And it's very easy for the next generation to see that, because if you tell them, hey, well, suddenly you're not going to have Wi-Fi service, you're not going to have digital TV, they begin to really understand the role of space travel, and living and working in space, how it affects their personal life that way. Years ago, if you'd say, how many of you want to be an astronaut? All hands would go up, oh, I want to be an astronaut. But today, I think they understand that working in these technical areas are the same technical areas that we need to save our planet. Water purification, food growth, waste management, recycling, those are all the long pole tents in going and living and working in space for extended periods. So I believe they understand that by leaving the planet, we can work together to also save the planet.
You mentioned the Space Camp. I remember when Space Camp got started, and it was this quirky thing that, thank God for Big Bang Theory, making Space Camp kind of like, in the national conversation. But it really has evolved. It's really grown. You have a graduation that's happening today. Talk to us about Space Camp and how Space Camp contributes in telling the mission, but also, as you said, like Elon Musk, inspiring a new generation.
Space Camp comes straight from the DNA of Werner von Braun, literally. He was walking through the rocket park here at the Rocket Center one day in the 70s, and he said, this is ridiculous. We have band camp, cheerleading camp, football camp. Why can't we have a science camp? Why don't we have a space camp? So we took that to heart in 1982. We've been running Space Camp for 37 years. We have 900,000 graduates all around the world. 20% of our graduates are international graduates. And that tells you that people around the world value what we've accomplished in this country technically far more than we do. We take it for granted, you and I. But they want their children to be inspired, but they want their young people to know. And it's a good thing, because it's going to take all of us together on these next great, deep missions into space. We learned our lesson on space station freedom, yay, America, we're going to do this by ourselves. We figured out right away it was too expensive and too difficult, and that we needed international partners. So I think that set the stage for the next era of space exploration, with all of our gateway opportunities at the moon to go back and to begin to learn how to live and work in space. And then, of course, the Mars mission is going to require both commercial and government, as well as international people.
Talk to us about the challenges of running a major museum like this. You know, we were talking, you guys have, it's really extraordinary for anybody who hasn't seen, it's one thing to see a Saturn V, and I know you have a very historic one undercover, but to see one actually standing and looking up at it is an extraordinary thing, all 363 feet of it. But there's maintenance that goes with it. We've got a space shuttle behind you with the tank and with the boosters. Talk to us about the challenges of running a museum like this, and also fundraising, because it's a bit of an arms race among museums, and the big donors feel like, well, we gave a lot of money to the Air and Space Museum, and so there's. Talk to us about the challenges associated with the fundraising part of it, the growing part of it, the publicity part of it, to ensure that you continue to grow, prosper, to satisfy your mission.
Mm-hmm. Well, we do have Earth's largest space collection. Smithsonian and others have more aircraft, but that's not really my mission here. We have the largest number of space artifacts, the only full-scale shuttle stack, full sky labs, of course, the National Historic Saturn V moon rocket, and so forth. But we are really lucky in that 0.5% of museums in the world are self-sustaining on their operating revenue, and we are in that group. We're very, very particular about trying to pay our own way and our own expenses with the operational activities that we have here. And about half of that is Space Camp income, so about half museum, about half Space Camp. We, of course, dearly need contributions like any other museum, because to paint a Saturn V, to restore a shuttle, it's in the millions of dollars. It's not small to have that kind of maintenance. But we're very proud of the work that we do here. We know that there's a public market for it, that people will come from Dubai and Beijing to go to Space Camp. And they come as adults, as children, families come. So I think it makes it a lot easier on us when we realize our passion and our mission is being responsibly sustained by our business approach.
There were some folks who were a little disappointed that the Apollo 8 mission didn't get more publicity, especially given that the 3 astronauts are still alive: Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and Bill Anders. Is there, do you have somebody who's a prominent member of this community? Do you think that folks really are going to all come together and celebrate Apollo 11? Because there is a little bit of a lingering concern that this great anniversary may go with, just sort of a brief thing on the news, as opposed to the recognition that a lot of people feel it deserves.
Not in the Rocket City. Huntsville is very aware. This is our DNA. This is our heritage. And we have got a year-long celebration going on. Happens to be Alabama's bicentennial birthday as well. So we've got these 2 enormous activities going on in the Rocket City. There are more than 400 events scheduled between now and the July anniversary. Music events, we even have plays being done, we have original music being written, there's art shows, car shows, we have everything imaginable related to Apollo 50, including 30 panels that have original members from the team there to talk to the public about different aspects of working on Apollo. So the other thing we're going to do to celebrate in the Rocket City on launch day, July 16th, we're going to set a Guinness World Record for launching the largest number of rockets ever launched in the world in the same place at the same time. So we're going to launch 5,000 rockets here at the Rocket Center. That's going to kick off a day-long, a 24-hour period of launching rockets in every time zone by our 900,000 alumni, teachers, friends, and ambassadors. Boy Scouts are joining, Girl Scouts are joining, AIA, AIAA are all joining in. We want to encourage people around the world to take any kind of rocket, a bottle rocket, a stomp rocket, an air rocket, and launch it that day with hopefully with a child, to inspire people once again to get off the planet and get moving. So we've got lots happening in the Rocket City that week.
It's going to be a good week for Estes. As somebody who used to shoot model rockets, I was a little, there used to be a vast collection, whereas now it's a little bit of a smaller collection. I was very proud of my Redstone. That was very accurately made. Talk to us about what's next. I'm going to ask you a reminiscence question, will be my last question, but talk to us about what's next for the museum. You guys have steadily expanded and added the collection. Talk to us about what's sort of the next major initiatives as we look to your strategic plan of where you guys want to be, say, in 5 to 10 years.
We've just now received the amazing gift of investment from Intuitive Technology in a brand new planetarium. We have an Evans and Sutherland 8K planetarium. This is the first time we've had planetarium capability. We've had IMAX theater for many years, but now we have a brand new planetarium. So that's going to open a whole new world of cosmology education that we haven't had previously. We, in the future, will continue to try to stay on the pointy end of the space program. My view about the museum, which we rarely call it that, we always call it the center, is that these artifacts that you see come in the wake of the mission. And so that is their appropriate place, just to be, oh, wow, look what happened as a result of this mission. What we like to continue to show and to exhibit is what's next. So we have commercial vehicles. We have the Sierra Nevada Dream Chaser here. We want to have a SpaceX capsule. They've told me when they fly enough of them, they'll give me one of those. So we want to stay on the pointy end. These young people who are coming through here, they're never going to fly a space shuttle. They're never going to fly a Saturn V. SLS and the other commercial vehicles are their spaceships. So we want to keep our view and our public exhibition here very pointed toward the future and educating people about our future in space.
And you obviously have a passion for space, even though you had a passion for the Navy, being a pioneer there as well. Dr. Barnhart was one of the first cadre of female officers to serve on America's warships. Talk to us a little bit about some of the really cool historical elements of this, because you just mentioned that you guys have Werner von Braun's desk, there's a replica of his office, but also the conference table around which talk to us about that conference table and how cool it must be to sit at it.
Well, because von Braun started this institution, we were very lucky to have about 80% of his personal effects and papers. We happen to have the table that was in his conference room out at NASA, and so it's literally every day where we're working around this conference table, we're there working it right where von Braun and his team created and executed the lunar landing. We also have his notebook that he made when he was 16 years old. He drew the complete space mission and all the things he was going to need for his mission, and the gold visor helmet to reflect the sun and the food. And he thought of everything. So it's really exciting to see these authentic elements that have come to us from, moonwalkers, from authentic engineers and scientists, and of course from the leaders of the program like von Braun himself.
And what do you think, the last question is, what do you think are sort of the big lessons from Werner von Braun? Because his, degree of innovation, honesty about what he got, for example, from Robert Goddard. There was this, everybody would say, oh, what did you do? And he said, look, we were building on Goddard because of what he accomplished, which is always to see a giant acknowledge another giant. But what do you think some of the sort of the lasting lessons are, as we think on that program, as we think back of the achievement? It was obviously 500,000 people who realized it, but there was also one man who was really driving that program forward as both a visionary, but also a practical and also first flight engineer. What are the lessons, do you think, are the most important lessons to remember, aside from his also extraordinary sense of humor?
Well, I'm a real student of von Braun and a real fan. I think he's one of the most extraordinary management leaders I've ever studied in my life. To think that a gentleman like him could be subjected to the Reich and the whim of the Reich, and then to come to a country where he didn't even speak the language at first, and we have his dictionary, by the way, that he had when he was here, and to convince a young John Kennedy, to convince a Congress to spend 10 times what the NASA budget had ever been before, that it can only be fueled by passion, imagination, and confidence in their ability to do that. I think as a leader, without exception, everyone who worked directly for him will tell you that he was a listener, that he was passionate and focused. A lot of the success, they say, is due to what they call the arsenal method, which, of course, they didn't have a lot of simulation back then like we do today. So the engineers would go from the drafting table to the shop and talk to the technical experts who were constructing the equipment and the hardware, then back to the drafting table, then back to the shop. So, build and test, build and test, build and test. They didn't have all the simulation, but they consistently kept moving forward with listening to one another about what would work and what wouldn't work, and carefully moving forward. They say he was just a phenomenal leader. I've met him a few times, but it didn't work for him, so I'm a big fan.
You're very, very lucky. You've got one of the best jobs in the world, Dr. Deborah Barnhart, who directs the Space and Rocket Center, but it's also one of the most amazing museums in the world. Ma'am, thanks very much. And it was a great pleasure, and look forward to coming down here and seeing you again.
Thank you. Come back for the Apollo 50th.